Most people think blue engagement ring basically begin and ends with a sapphire, but blue is probably the biggest and the most diverse color category in the gemstone world. Some blue stones you can pick up for under $100, others have set auction records that put them in the same league as the fine art. Some feel soft and calm like an ocean water, others glow so intensely they almost don't look natural. And blue gemstones create a completely different moods. Royal blue, stormy blue, velvet blue, neon blue, icy blue, almost celestial looking blues. This video continues our series of the best gemstones for the engagement ring, so if you haven't seen the previous one, check them out in the description. Today we are ranking blue engagement ring stones from the least expensive to the most expensive, including natural stones, collector stones, artistic alternative, lab created options as well, and eventually blue diamond. And before we start, here's how to read the information on the screen. For every stone, you will see approximate price range per carat for the engagement ring quality, not museum piece. You also see the Mohs hardness scale, which measures scratch resistant. And for the engagement rings, once you go below around 7, stones usually require more care for long-term daily wear. We also show in rarity. That doesn't mean how famous the stone is, it means how difficult to find the gem quality material in general. You'll also see carat level, which is basically how careful you need to be with the stone in a real life. And finally, every stone has a special trait, something visual or historically unique that made it important in the jewelry world. Alright, let's start with one of the oldest blue stones in human history. Lapis Lazuli has been mined in Afghanistan for more than 6,000 years. Ancient Egyptians used it in jewelry, in carving, burial mask, and ceremonial objects for long before engagement rings existed. And later, Lapis Lazuli became incredibly important in European art, because ultramarine pigments made from Lapis Lazuli was once so expensive that in some parts of Europe it was valued similar to the gold by weight. Also, artists reserved it for the most important parts of the painting, especially the robes of the Virgin Mary, for example. Visually, Lapis Lazuli still looks completely different from modern faceted gemstones. The deep royal blue mixed with the golden pirate inclusions can resemble stars in the night sky. This is much more of a historical and artistic stone than a traditional luxury engagement ring stone. Blue agate creates a much softer and calmer feeling. The beauty comes from the bending pattern and smoky blue-gray tones rather than sparkle. And because every agate forms differently, no two stones ever look identical, most are cut as the cabochons instead of the faceted stones. This category appeals more to the buyers who want something natural and personal rather than prestigious. Blue Topaz became one of the most commercially important blue gemstones in the jewelry for very simple reason. It gives the strong blue at accessible pricing. Interestingly, most blue topaz on the market today is treated. Natural blue topaz exists, but it's extremely uncommon. Most stones begin as the colorless topaz before treatment creates shades like sky blue, Swiss blue, and London blue. And those colors create completely different moods by themselves. Sky blue feels icy and bright, Swiss blue look electric, and London blue, as you might guess, feels darker and moodier. Compared to the sapphire, blue topaz usually feels cleaner and more commercial rather than luxurious. Iolite was historically called a water sapphire, but what makes it interesting is not the similarity to the sapphire, it's the way the colors shift. Blue, gray, violet. This optical effect is called pleochroism, and according to some historical theories, Vikings may have used thin slices of iolite to navigate because the stone could help detect the sunlight through the clouds. Compared to the sapphires, iolite feels less stable and more mysterious. Moonstone became famous because of the glowing optical effect called aldulorescence. That floating blue flash almost looked like the light moving underneath the surface. And unlike highly sparkle blue gemstones, moonstones feel soft and atmospheric, almost dreamlike. Moonstones exploded in popularity during the Art Nouveau era. Designers like René Lalique became obsessed with the glowing organic material and flowing natural forms, and moonstone became one of the defining stones of that movement, of that era. This is why moonstone still feel artistic and unconventional even today. Blue apatite can produce incredibly vivid tropical colors. Some stones almost resemble Paraiba Tourmaline at first glance, especially materials from the Madagascar. And for the price, the color can look almost unreal, but this is where buyers need to be careful. Apatite is much softer than most people expect, so while it can look stunning in jewelry, it's usually a better fit for occasional wear pieces rather than daily wear engagement rings, unless you're very careful with it. Quick pause. If you're shopping for the engagement ring, check our playlist in the description below. It walks you through the key parts of the process step by step, so we can make a better decision with more confidence. I hope it helps, and I would love working together. Turquoise is one of the oldest gemstones ever used in jewelry. Ancient Egyptians used it thousands of years ago, Persian royalties praise it, and Native American jewelry make turquoise iconic in an entirely different way. Unlike sapphires or aquamarine, turquoise was valued long before modern gemstone faceting ever existed. The pure sky blue Persian material historically became the most valuable, and even today, fine untreated turquoise with the strong color is becoming harder to find. Visually, turquoise feels earthy, cultural, and artistic rather than luxurious in the traditional sense. Kyanite is one of the strangest gemstones from the gem cutting perspective, because its hardness actually changes depending on the direction itself. That makes cutting and setting much more complicated than the rest of the gemstones in this list. But visually, good kyanite can be beautiful, especially the deep velvet blue materials. And some stones can resemble sapphire surprisingly closer in color. But compared to the sapphire, kyanite is much more fragile and far less common in engagement rings world. Blue zircon might be one of the most underrated blue gemstones in the jewelry. And first, it has nothing to do with the cubic zirconia. Natural zircon is real gemstone, and visually it can be unpredictable. The sparkle is intense. In fact, zircon produces more fire than the sapphire and even more than the diamond in a certain lighting condition. And it's also created a double refraction, which makes the internal facets appear slightly doubled. That energetic, almost chaotic sparkle is exactly why collectors love it. Most famous zircons comes from Cambodia, and many receive heat treatment to create that electric blue color. Compared to the sapphire, blue zircon feels much more energetic and explosive visually. Aquamarine creates one of the calmest looks in the gemstone world. The name literally means seawater, and once you see a fine aquamarine, the connection makes sense immediately. Compared to the sapphire, aquamarine feels lighter, softer, more transparent, almost airy. Historically, sailors believe aquamarine protect them at the sea, which actually feeds the personality of the stone perfectly. One of the reasons buyers love aquamarine is that the large, clean stones remain relatively accessible, so you can create a very elegant high-end look without entering serious sapphire pricing. For example, check our latest incredible aquamarine engagement ring with the side diamonds. The most famous materials come from Brazil, especially deep saturated Santa Maria aquamarines, and for engagement rings, aquamarines remained one of the best practical blue stones overall. Larimar looks almost unreal in person. The color can resemble shallow Caribbean water with white clouds moving through it. And what makes Larimar especially interesting is that it's found only in the Dominican Republic. The stone itself formed through the volcanic activity. The name combines Larissa, that's the daughter of the discoverer, with the Spanish word for the sea, mar. Unlike sapphire or zircon, Larimar isn't about the brilliance or sparkles. The appeal is the calming tropical appearance. It's almost like carrying a piece of ocean water inside of the ring. Blue moissanite creates a completely different look from the natural blue gemstones. This is not subtle sparkle, it's intense. And because moissanite produces strong rainbow flashes, stronger than the diamond, blue moissanite can almost look futuristic under certain lighting. Some buyers love that effect, others think it's way too artificial. That debate is basically the entire moissanite conversation. And unlike sapphire or aquamarine, blue moissanite is usually chosen specifically because it looks modern and unconventional, and it's also quite affordable. Tanzanite became famous incredibly quick after the discovery in Tanzania in 1967, partially because the color is extraordinary, and partially because Tiffany heavily promoted the stone internationally. Tanzanite shifts between the blue, violet, purple depending on the lighting and the view angle. Compared to aquamarine, the overall feeling is richer and more dramatic, almost evening-like stone. Most Tanzanite on the market today is the heat-treated to achieve that famous blue-violet appearance, and unlike sapphires, Tanzanite usually feels softer and more luxurious emotionally rather than practical. Spinel spent centuries being mistaken for other gemstones. Some of the most famous royal rubies in history later turns out actually to be spinels. And while blue spinels is less famous than the red spinels, the stones can be beautiful, especially the cleaner gray and cobalt blue materials. One reason collectors love spinels is that it's usually untreated. That matters more than many buyers can realize, especially in the colored gemstones. Compared to sapphire, blue spinels often feel cleaner, sharper, and slightly more modern. And then there is a cobalt spinel, the electric blue color that comes directly from the cobalt itself. And the finest materials from Vietnam almost glows. Many stones are tiny, often under 1 carat, but collectors chase them aggressively because the color is so unusually vivid. Indicolite is the blue variety of tourmaline, and truly pure blue stones are extremely rare. Most materials shift slightly teal, green, or violet, which makes the stone more interesting visually. Compared to the sapphire, Indicolite usually feels moodier and more organic, less formal, less polished. The finest stones become surprisingly expensive because clean, saturated blue tourmalines are genuinely difficult to find. Benitoite is one of those gemstones many jewelry lovers haven't even heard of. Most gems quality materials come from California, which is why it eventually became the official state gemstone. And visually, Benitoite can look shockingly in the right lighting. The fire is extremely strong, in some cases even stronger than the sapphire. Many stones also fluorescence under the UV lighting. The challenge is the size. Fine benitoites are usually very small, which makes larger, cleaner stones especially collectible. Grandidierite is one of the rarest gemstones in the entire video. For a long time, collectors could count the number of faceted gem quality stones almost by hands. Most materials came from Madagascar. And visually, Grandidierite feels almost like a blend between the aquamarine and teal sapphire. Oceanic, soft, slightly mysterious. This is much more of a collector stone than a mainstream engagement ring choice. Few gemstones shocked the jewelry world the way Paraiba Tourmaline did. When dealers first saw the color in Brazil in the late 1980s, some reportedly thought it has to be artificial. Fine Paraiba contains copper, and the copper creates an almost neon glow that looks electrically lit from the inside of the stone. No camera fully captures it, and even experienced jewelry buyers are often surprised the first time they see a truly fine Paraiba in person. Brazilian Paraiba remains the most valuable at the time, but important deposits were later discovered in Mozambique and Nigeria. Compared to the sapphire, Paraiba feels less timeless and more visually extreme. If there is one blue gemstone that defines engagement rings, it's a sapphire. No other blue stones combine durability, prestige, history, and practicality quite the same way. This is the benchmark, the standard almost every other blue gemstone gets compared against. The most famous category is the royal blue sapphires. Deep, velvety, rich, but still bright enough to stay alive in light. Historically, the most legendary sapphires came from Kashmir. Those stones developed a soft velvet appearance because of the microscopic rutilite silken side of the crystals. Today, Kashmir sapphires are basically collector-level auction stones because the mine was exhausted long time ago. Sri Lanka sapphires became famous for a different reason. They often brighter and cleaner, and they exist across a huge range of blue tones. Now, this is where modern engagement rings trends become interesting. Montana sapphires exploded in popularity because they feel more understated and natural. A lot of them carry denim blue, teal tones or slightly stormy gray blue colors. Compared to the royal blue sapphires, Montana sapphires usually feel less formal and more organic. Teal sapphires became their own category, almost independently from traditional blue sapphires. And the reason buyers love them is that the color constantly shifts. Some lean blue, some lean green, some transform depending on the lighting. Party sapphires became popular for the similar reason. Multiple colors inside one stone create something that feel completely unique. I have big video about the teal sapphires, check it out. And sapphires remains dominant because the category itself is enormous. There is sapphires for almost every type of buyer. If you want deeper breakdown, especially about the sapphires, Montana sapphires, teal sapphires, and sapphire pricing itself, we already have a separate dedicated video on the channel going much further in the details. Lab blue sapphires became one of the strongest value categories in the engagement rings because chemically it's still a sapphire, and modern labs can now create perfectly clean royal blue stones, silky included stones, steel colors, Montana-like shades, even antique looking material. That flexibility changed the market dramatically, especially for buyers who love sapphires visually but don't want to spend natural sapphire prices. And unlike many people assume, lab sapphires are not imitation stones. They are real sapphires growing in a controlled environment. Again, I have a separate video about it. Lab blue diamonds opened a completely different category of the jewelry because natural blue diamonds are so rare that most buyers never realistically consider them. But lab created blue diamonds suddenly made those colors accessible. Many are created through HPHT or irradiation process, and compared to the natural blue diamonds, lab can often produce stronger and more saturated blues. This is one of the few realistic ways buyer can access the blue diamond look without collector level pricing. And finally, blue diamond itself, one of the rarest and most valuable gemstone categories on Earth. The blue color forms because of the boron inside of the crystal structure, and that happened incredibly rare in nature. The most famous example is probably the Hope diamond, a 45.5 carat blue diamond now displayed in Washington, D.C. Its history is incredible. It includes royal ownership, theft, revolution, private collection, and legends about curses. I traveled to DC to see that stone and I have a separate video about it. Check it out. Blue diamonds also regularly break auctions, and at this level pricing almost stopped behaving rationally. These stones move through the museum, elite collection, and major auction houses more than the traditional jewelry stones. And compared to the sapphires, blue diamonds are usually less about rich saturated colors and more about extreme rarity, which makes them the perfect ending for this list. From ancient blue stones used thousands of years ago all the way to some of the rarest gemstones on earth. And if one of those stones caught your attention, we already have full in-depth video here on the channel about many of them, including sapphires, moissanite, diamonds, Paraiba tourmalines, and engagement ring durability by itself. So before you buy an engagement ring, I highly recommend learning about the specific stones you are considering, because blue gemstones can look, wear, and age very differently in a real life. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.